If you recall, we've been going through, starting a new series on practical Christianity. I've got sinus infection, bronchitis on medicine, so you don't have to worry about it, but if I put a cough drop in, you'll know why I'm doing it. So, appreciate you praying. I was asked tomorrow at 8:40 or so, on Monday and Tuesday, Will was speaking or talking to the athletic director in school that he's at, and he teaches the religion classes, and said that I had taught on world religions and cults 35 years ago. Anyway, I threw most of my stuff away because I didn't think I'd ever use it again. They asked me if I'd come tomorrow and Monday and Tuesday and speak on Mormonism and then also on Jehovah's Witness. The difficulty is they only got 35 to 40 minutes each day. So basically you also have a great, not many students in each class, but some are very mentally challenged and then others are in advanced, but all in the same class. So basically what to tell them in a short period of time. When you have a week or two, it's much easier in one aspect because but when you have short limited time. So anyway, so I'll try to do that tomorrow. Got to finish putting together what I want to talk about today after this afternoon. Had to get the sermon done first. So, but practical Christianity, if you remember, this will be on part 3. If you remember the first week we looked at, this is called authentic Christianity, which was in Psalms 15. You remember David had come to know personal faith, and he then said that when he's talking about the temple, he wanted authentic Christianity, authentic worship. It tells about 11 different things that an authentic Christian would be doing. Last week, you remember we saw basically on trials, basically going from trials to make them triumph in your life. And we saw that in the book of James, the author, there's different Jameses in the Bible, but it's the James, the half brother of Jesus, who had written it. He'd written it to those who are scattered. They're scattered because of persecution and other things. And so one of the tendencies is going to be when you're under a lot of persecution is to go along to get along. And so we even applied that, if you remember on Wednesday night, those that were here Wednesday, we applied that to Daniel, even in chapter 1. And throughout the book of Daniel, Daniel is constantly under trials and temptations as well as his friends were. And so it's good to look at it. And the reason he wrote it, then obviously they're under trials, temptations, how to get out, and thinking about doing that. Also talked about they had trouble with partiality and trouble with their tongue, reminded like any of us, so very, very similar. And so that's why in the book there's 108 verses, there's 50 some commands to Christians of what to do. So we were looking at then, if you remember then last week we saw on the turning trials into triumphs, that all of us, it's a possibility, we can make it joyful. How can we consider it all joy? That's a choice we make. It says win, so then all of us are going to have them. It says various, so yours is going to be different than mine. Also, it's going to be, like I said, personal. It's a process. You're going from one step to the next, but how many of us want to change the process? It's one of the hardest things I had when I was in high school. I was in an algebra class, and the guy came from American Airlines, and all his life he'd ever done was math, and he had retired, and he came to teach. Well, when he went to try to teach somebody like me who had never had any of that kind of stuff, he skipped steps all the time. He'd go to step 1 to step 4 and give you the answer. Well, I didn't know what step 2 and 3 was. Well, we can have to be careful, though, in this book. He tells you you have a process you have to go through. But how many of us are trying to bypass the steps we need to go through and get done? Then you also notice the product was then to be like maturity. 1 Peter we saw last week in chapter 1, when you're under a trial, it proves that you're a believer. It also is a purifying factor. When you put something under fire, it purifies. Same thing in our life, it purifies. And then also, when we get in the middle of it, we don't know what to do, we're told to pray, which is amazing to me when you look at Nehemiah chapter 2 through 6. Nehemiah, 6 different times, he was under different things, and he prayed every single time he faced a difficulty, and God gave him direction. So he was under a trial, he then would pray, and God would give him clarity as to what to do. A very good example. And then, if you remember last week, we talked about paths. There's a rich man, and also a poor man. They both have trials. And so basically what each one needs to be doing, not looking at their circumstances, not relying on their money. And then the end was in the persevere. If we persevere, we get the crown of life. And so we need to look at the end result to know what to get. So it takes us then today, James 1, in verse 13 down to 18. And the subject will be handling temptation. Any of you ever been tempted? If you say you haven't read the Bible. Mark Antony is one of Rome's great silver-tongued orators. He was an intelligent young man, strong leader, and a courageous soldier. But he had one major strength, character weakness. And that was the fact that he would give in to temptation. It's reported that his tutor even was so enraged and said to him, "O Marcus, O colossal child, able to conquer the world, but unable to resist the temptation." And that's what cost him his life. If those of you that know the story, obviously he was rising just down to a couple of them left to rule the world. And Cleopatra sails up on the boat. Cost him his marriage, cost him his empire, and later cost him his life because of the temptation. So it's important for all of us to look at it. Notice then, if you look at it in James chapter 1, notice one thing I want to do is separate what's the difference between a trial and a temptation. It's the same Greek word, by the way, but it's never translated the same because of the purpose and the outcome. A trial is a test designed by or allowed by God to reveal and develop us. God brings trials or allows them to develop us to make us more Christ-like. Whereas a temptation, allowed by God, but it's brought about our own sin nature, and often it's enhanced by Satan to bring about our destruction. So the outcome is different. Sometimes it's hard to distinguish between the two when you're in it. But they quite often go together. Quite often temptation and trial go together, and let me give you an example. Think about with Abraham. In Genesis chapter 12, there was a famine in the land, and Abraham went down to Egypt, right? While he was in Egypt, Abimelech, which would be the title of the ruler there, if you remember, the Egyptians held marriage in high regard. And he sees that Sarah is pretty, so he can't marry her because Abraham is what? He's alive. So in order to do that, what would the Abimelechs of his day do? They go kill him and then they go marry him. They'd add another one to their harem. Okay? So notice that you have a trial, you have a temptation. Now, Abraham, was he given a promise just earlier that he was going to have a child with Sarah? Yep, that's the trial. So is Abimelech going to kill him? You believe God? The trial is to trust him. Or are you going to handle it in your own way? In the temptation, then he says, she's my half-sister, or she's my sister. Which was true, but it was also his wife. So I think quite often trials and temptations can go together. We have to be careful. He never should have done it. God spared him. But needless to say, he wasn't walking by faith when he did it. Because God had already promised him a child through Sarah, and they hadn't had it yet. Therefore, God would have to keep him alive. So I think it's interesting. Achan did the same thing. Do you not have the trial? Don't take anything. And what did he do? He sees the wealth, and he does what? He takes it. Nehemiah 2-4. Are you going to go along with Sanballat, Tobiah, or are you going to resist and stand firm in different things? Did Daniel have any problem? Daniel 1. What about the things he's supposed to eat? Well, couldn't he just bow down one time? Daniel 6. What about his friends? Could they not in the fiery furnace? There's always trials and temptations in people's life, and they often go together. So let's look at the source then in verse 13. Notice the source. So we've seen it's there's trial and temptation are distinct, but notice the source. Notice first of all, let no one say when he is tempted. Notice it says when. It doesn't say if. So every single one of us is going to be tempted. Every single individual will be tempted. So I think it's important to remember we can never eradicate the presence of temptations in our life. We can go and hide in a monastery, but temptation is still going to be there. Still going to be there. So it's important. What we have to do is know how to respond or react to them. How do I respond or react to a temptation? You don't eradicate, you try to know how to respond. Second thing, it says, I'm not being tempted by God. So in other words, God doesn't promote it. It's interesting, the word there for by is not the usual word, which would be hupo, it's apo or apo, which means God is not involved directly or indirectly. God has nothing to do with the temptation. And so I think it's important to remember that, because we often mess that up. In Genesis chapter 3 and verse 12, after the fall of man, and they meet in the garden, remember, and God comes up to Adam, and then what does he say? The woman that you gave me. He's putting the blame on who? God. Not accepting responsibility for his own actions. God didn't. But how many of us do the same thing? You made me mad. You did this, or whatever it might be. We put it on instead of accepting responsibility for our own action. The temptation. So I think it's important for us to look at, one, it's always in our lives, are available around. It's never promoted by God. So we have to make sure we look at it. Notice what it does tell us, though. Notice it's the process. Notice it says, for God cannot be tempted by evil. He himself does not tempt anyone. But notice in verse 14, then, the process. Each one is tempted when he's carried away and enticed by his own lust. Okay, it's a fishing term. And it's a fishing term in which the angler is going to drop bait. Now, does the angler know what kind of bait the fish likes?
Yes.
Does he know where to put the bait? Okay, so let's think about this. I was years ago was with them. I wasn't fishing, but I was with Jerry and Grady and stuff, and they were fishing for crappie. Alrighty, Jerry, did you fish on the bottom? Why not, Greg?
That's where the catfish are.
That's where the catfish are. Okay, so the angler knows what bait to use. He knows where to put the bait. He knows what kind of bait. You don't use the same bait for crappie as you're going to use for a catfish. You put it in different places. So notice then, Satan knows exactly what we like. He's a great angler. He knows where to put that bait. He knows what kind is going to get, that we're going to be interested in. And once the fish gets interested in the bait, he forgets about all the other things. But notice what he goes on. So the bait's put out there, it lures us. And then talks about the next one is we're enticed. The inner desire, we're attracted to it. Is the fish thinking at all about the end results? No. People don't think about the end results. You think about it, the two great examples in Scripture about being tempted. Genesis 39 was Joseph, Potiphar's wife. You notice Joseph says what? It's a sin against God. He won't be with her. First he said he wouldn't listen to her. Then he wouldn't be with her. He'd want to be near her. And when there was nobody in the house and she grabs his coat, he does what? He flees, which by the way is interesting. We're always told to flee temptation. Always. But in 2 Samuel chapter 11, it says with David saw, and then it says what? He inquired. From the vantage point of his home, he could see the others around. He should have turned, but when he then inquired and then invited her, that's the difference. The difference between the two is how they handle the temptation. David wasn't thinking about the end result. It cost him dearly. It cost his whole family dearly. Notice it says he yields to temptation, has two forces are joined together. It has birth. That's what it says there in verse 15. That when lust is conceived, it gives birth to sin, and when sin is accomplished, it brings forth death. So you have the same thing. You have two forces are joined, a birth takes place, and it ends up with death. Just like with us. But we're not thinking about it when the temptation's out there. When the little kid goes into the candy store and he doesn't have any money and he sees a piece of candy and he does what? He grabs the piece of candy. He's not thinking about anything other than what? But how many of us do the same thing about a diet? Oh, we see all that, and it's so good, and anything, all that. Just one more donut, just one piece of pie, one more piece of chicken, whatever it might be. And then we take it, and then I guess I'm going to have to exercise more tomorrow. It's always tomorrow, but notice in the process that you have, the temptation is there, and it's going to bring about death. I want you to think about the possibilities that you have also. The possibility you have, remember in 1 John, why don't we turn over to 1 John for a minute since we're real close by. Chapter 2, 1 John chapter 2. Notice the possibilities. 1 John chapter 2 and verse 16. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. We're all going to be tempted in one of those three areas. Lust of the world, the lust of the eyes, or the pride of life. Turn over to Hebrews just for a moment. Turn over to Hebrews then. Hebrews chapter 4. Notice in verse 15. We do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in all things as we are, yet without sin. Christ was tempted. Remember in Matthew 4, 3 are recorded. They are fall in those three categories. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. That's why it says he was tempted in all areas as we are. All three areas Christ was likewise tempted. Could Satan give him the world? He is the ruler of this world. Bypass the cross, worship me, and I'll give it to you. And notice the temptation was very real. Now obviously Christ didn't. We're thankful, but he understands what we're going through. That's why we're told, notice the next verse, therefore draw near with confidence to receive grace and mercy. Do it with confidence. We have a high priest that understands. He's been through all the temptations, same areas we have. He understands what we're going through. So the possibility is there. The lust of the eye. It's just amazing how that happens. I've said this many times to you. Dad and I were mowing together. We used to go into this particular place to get gas all the time. And a lady that worked there was real nice, was very helpful. So this was going to be my last week. So really, she lived in the area. I'm going to now go, and she was now going to go to a store way out in Broken Arrow. And I said, well, are they paying you more? She said, no. Well, how come? Well, the person who was hired after me, they gave them the title of assistant manager, and they didn't give it to me. I said, but if they get any difference in pay? No. So you're going to go all the way to Broken Arrow for no more money and not stay here because one gets the title of assistant manager with no more money. Okay? What was the problem? Okay. But how many of us do the same thing? Or people will do with promotions. How many times do people take jobs, take promotions, and there's nothing wrong with moving up or doing different things, but how many times are we falling in the trap? Not what's best for the family, not what's best for everything else. We're doing it because of the pride factor. We want a new car, we want to be the title, whatever the title may be. It falls for every single one of us. How many times do you get upset with siblings when they're doing well, or some friend? Are we supposed to rejoice when somebody else is blessed? How many of us do not rejoice when somebody else is blessed? Because we're jealous. Why was that them and not me? And so I think it's important. The temptations are all there. That human nature is in front of every one of us. And so we have to be thinking about it. So think about the possibility. And we know in Matthew 4 and then also in Luke, Christ was tempted, right, in all three areas. And what's interesting, how did Christ answer Satan in all three instances? What? Scripture. Well, isn't Jesus the Son of God? Couldn't he not have said anything to Satan and it'd be correct? So if Jesus decides to use Scripture, what does that tell us about you and I? What should be our authority and what should we do? Scripture. Did Satan use Scripture also? He did. He simply misquoted it. Only quoted part of it. And that's what happens a lot with your cults. They will quote only part of the Scripture or misquote it on purpose in order to do that. But on the temptation, turn over with the last part of Luke chapter 4 on the temptation of Christ. And let's look at something for a moment. So here you have the possibilities: the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life. Notice, I think it's interesting, chapter 4, after Jesus has stood all three, quoted Scripture each time. Notice Luke 4 and verse 13. And when Satan had finished every temptation, he departed from him until, what does it say? An opportune time. Okay, we resist and do what we should. And what's Satan going to do? He's going to come back. He'll come back. A different package. As a fisherman, the old fish doesn't take your bait this time. Do you come back with another one, Greg? Yep. You come back with something else. Or maybe he doesn't like that color. Maybe he wants this. Whatever it might be. Satan is going to do the same thing with you and I. He's going to keep coming back with different things trying to trap us. By the way, Flip Wilson is wrong when he said the devil made me do it. The devil gives the temptation. You and I choose to do it. So think about it. Back in James, I want to ask some questions. What temptation are you facing? We're all facing them. It could be a shortcut, it could be a lot of things. How are you facing them? I think how is very important too. How many people think I can do it myself? It's an important question. How many times do you have that with little kids that are growing up and they want to do everything themselves and this stuff is all over them, but they want to grow up, they want to do it themselves. And a little bit of help and guidance, they'd be a lot better off. Well, that how is going to be important that we try to answer that. Are you being tempted to bypass or shortcut? Any of you ever tried to do a shortcut? How many of you tried to shortcut a trial and answer it yourself? You ever try that? How well did it work? Let's look at the solutions. It's kind of interesting back in James chapter 1. And notice what it says in verse 16 in James 1. Do not be deceived, my beloved brethren. So in other words, he just talked about the trap and what the result was going to be. So the first thing and the solution on temptations is how many of us look ahead? What's going to happen? What's going to happen when I do this? Why do you think it is? How many of you ever been in where you go in this deal or some salesman and this offer is only good today? You have got to sign it right now. If you don't sign it right now, this offer is not any good. Why are they doing that? Pressuring you. They don't want you to think ahead. They don't want you to think about it because they know good and well there's a good chance you're going to do what? Turn it down. So one is we got to look ahead. What is the outcome going to be if I do this? I think it's very, very important for all of us. That's why it's important as couples too to talk things through. How do you like it when one makes a decision that's going to affect you and you haven't talked to the other one? And so it's important to look at that. Second one, notice what he tells us in verse 17 is to look around. Every good thing bestowed and every perfect gift is from God, from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation, no shifting shadows. So notice then, look around and you can see what you have. How many of us look around and see what we have? Or how many of us look around and see what we don't have? Now I think that's a big difference, is it not? Look in the Garden of Eden. What did Satan dwell with Eve? Look, the tree is good for what?
To look at.
And it's good for food. God said what? And by the way, Satan added. He said, don't touch it. God didn't say it. He said, don't eat it. He adds to the word, and then she saw that it looked desirable, and so on. Notice, if God wanted them to have it, how many good things did they have in the garden? I mean, How many times do we have so many good things in our life, but we look at the one thing that we don't have? What did David not have? Women in his life that were beautiful? Yes. Why was he looking? And so I think it's important. God gives only good gifts. The second thing, notice it says the way God gives is good. I think that's important. Can I give you a good gift, but it's not a good way of giving it to you? Yeah. I can have strings attached. I can do other things. A lot of times that can happen. So notice God not only gives you good things, but He does it in the right way. Big, big difference. Third thing, notice it says God gives constantly. It's present participle. How many times do we think that God's not doing anything good for us? We don't see Him. Does that mean He's not giving us good things? You think about it, most of the things that He's given us every day, we take for granted. Think about your oxygen level. Nitrogen is the most present in our atmosphere, oxygen. In order for you and I to live, you have to have oxygen between what two places, percentage-wise? Between 18 and 21, 22, thereabouts. Primarily just in that 19 to 21 to 22 range. You get too much oxygen, what happens?
Fire.
You get not enough oxygen, what happens? You get too much nitrogen, what happens? You get too much nitrogen, it replaces the oxygen in your lungs, your brain shuts down, you're dead. We take all these things for granted. One little change and we're gone. And that's part of why when you first go to a different place in high elevation, not as much oxygen, it takes a while for your body to adjust. So think about it. We have so many things that we have. We take our vehicles for granted. We take the lights. We take the power. All these different things we take for granted. And God's allowed us to be where we're at. Every good thing. Notice it says God doesn't change either. How many of us are a little bit better with one person than we are with another? God is the same with all of us. There's no variation with God. So think about it. The solution. How many of us are looking ahead at the outcome of that temptation? How many of us are looking around and see what all God's doing for us? I think what happens is we get upset when God takes a loved one. And I understand that, but how many of us are thankful for the fact that we had the loved one? And I think there's a lot of things. Be thankful for what we've had, and not for what we don't have. What about in Philippians 4 and verse 8? Finally, my brother, whatsoever is lovely, whatever is a good report, anything excellent, anything worthy of praise, let your mind what? Dwell on these things. It's what our mind dwells on. That's why in Romans 8, the battle is over the mind. When you control your mind with the Holy Spirit's help, then you're well on your way. Why do you think all the advertisement, what's the all advertisement trying to do? Enticing you to where you're not happy with what you have. And you have to have whatever they're trying to say. Why do we have so many open houses certain times of the year? We're trying to get, our realtors are trying to get us into that house to do what? To be dissatisfied with what we've got. I mean, car, same way. Hey, you ever been to a car lot? You're looking at one. You want to test drive it? Why do they want you to test drive it? Once they know you, they get you behind the wheel. Yeah. And then they're going to want you to sign when? Today. They don't want you to go home and think about it. They entice you. Okay, so look ahead, look around. Notice then in verse 18, look within. In the exercise of His will, He brought us forth from the word of truth so that we might be, as it were, the first fruits among His creation. Notice, I think it's interesting what His desire is. His desire is He brought us to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ, and He uses the Word of God to do it. I think it's important for us to look at that, and then our design is first fruits. Speaking to them at this time, meaning more to come. But you and I have, in Ephesians chapter 8, remember, for our grace are you saved through faith, right? What about verse 10 then? We're saved by faith, but then verse 10, we're created for workmen to do good works. So when you think about it, when we're wanting to look within, we're saved. He saved us. He's done all this for us. Now He wants us to do something for Him. And a temptation is going to ruin what He's trying what He's designed for us to do. And so it's important for us to know how to handle it. We're looking ahead, we're looking around, we're looking within. And all those things are important. Also, I think it's interesting, we need to look beside. In 1 Corinthians 15:33, it says, do not be deceived, same word you had in verse 16. Bad company does what? Corrupts good morals. We need to look around. Who are we associating ourselves with? You have the same thing in 2 Timothy 2 and verse 22. Timothy's told, flee youthful lust, and then it says, then pursue fellowship with those who are of like mind. So we need to look around. Who are we associating ourselves with? Because we will start behaving like them, whether we like it or not. When you go to my sister lives up now in Wisconsin, she calls on the phone. Do I have to ask which sister it is? Why not? Her accent. Well, she's been up there so long, you know, she didn't go up there with that accent. She didn't try to get that accent. Well, what about the one that calls me from Alabama? Do you think she has any type of different accent? She's been down there most of her life. She has a different accent. Who we are around, we are picking up on things all the time. If you don't believe it, just look at some pictures of yourself 40 years ago. How many of you wished you could throw them away and burn them? Some of the hairdos, some of the glasses, some of the clothes you wore, the leisure suits. Remember some of that stuff I look at? And, you know, bright yellow pants, bright red pants. They had all kinds of colors. I mean, every color known in the rainbow, I wore them. You can't hide from those pictures, though. But I thought they were really, really something when I was wearing them. Okay, but again, if somebody said you're being influenced by the people around you, I would have said what? No. But I was. Also, I think we need to look intelligently. So, when I say about looking intelligently, I remember had a person come up to me, he was talking about his son, and he was real proud of him. And he said, well, the son was in high school and he having to do a lot of stuff on the computer, and the son came up and was crying. He said, what's wrong? He said, well, all these things are popping up on the computer and I don't want to be looking at them, I just don't know what to do. So as a parent, I found there's a Christian organization that then can put these blocks on where this stuff can't come through. Okay, so looking intelligently. They're coming for help. What do you need to do? Come up with a solution that will work. Now it makes the computer slower. There's some things you might not be able to do, but what's the outcome? Had another one come up to me and he said he was a single guy, and he said to me a number of years ago, he said he's having real trouble with it. He said, well, I'm getting rid of my computer. He said, when I'm at work, I have a computer and I can do everything I need to on the computer, and it's being monitored. I'm worried about it. But when I get home, he said, it's a brand new computer, but I need to get rid of that temptation. I'm giving it away. So notice they looked intelligently. This is the area I have difficulty with, so I'm going to get rid of it. Well, whatever it is. I had another one that talks about when they go in the grocery, they always going down the magazine aisle. Why are you going down the magazine aisle and checking just to see if the magazine happens to be there? You can go in the grocery store and not go down the aisle. I mean, that's your choice. So I think it's important for all of us to stop and really look at it, whatever it might be. Certain stores, whatever it might be. If you have trouble with whatever your vices might be, set up roadblocks. If you have a tendency to be an impulsive buyer, then you need to set up whatever roadblocks those might need to be. So let's think about some applications then when we look at it. Do I make it a habit to look ahead before I do something? Do I look ahead? Really think through the outcome. If I want to win, I'll do it. Why do you go through spring training? Because of what you want to accomplish. Do I look around at what I have, or do I focus on what I don't have? It's really easy to do. Really easy to do. Do I look within and see that God has a design and a purpose for me? And if I do, am I working with that purpose? How many of you want a purpose that God's not designed you to do? It's amazing when I watch sports and I see the guys that are 7 foot tall and they're shooting from half court, and the ones that are 6 foot are under the basket. I never understood why a guy who's that tall, why he's not under the basket. But anyway, It's amazing. Do I look beside to see who I associate with? What kind of influence they are, or what kind of influence I am? Am I helping the people I'm around? Do I look intelligently around and take what steps to help minimize the temptation? Those are things I can do. For myself, or for my family, or for anybody else. 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 Family,